Hello and welcome to the Scramble. Today we discuss the Me Too movement, Steve Wynn, his resignations and the claims made against him, if people who are accused ever face real consequences, and the harsh reality of sensationalized or false claims of sexual assault. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host Sarah Coker and this is the Scramble. The Me Too movement went viral in October 2017 after sexual misconduct allegations against film producer Harvey Weinstein. Now, the term Me Too is not something new. Tarana Burke, who is the founder of the Me Too movement, coined the term in 2006 after a 13-year-old girl confessed to Burke that she'd been sexually assaulted. Burke states she wished she had told the girl, "Me too." The movement is used to raise awareness of sexual abuse, misconduct, and assault. The accusations against Weinstein sparked discussion on sexual misconduct in the workplace. It also brought attention to the fact that it was an open secret in Hollywood for years. These cases are not something rare nor specific to Hollywood. It happens in workplaces around the world and in our own communities. One of the most prominent figures in the Las Vegas hospitality industry, Steve Wynn, recently faced allegations of sexual misconduct that took place over the past several decades. According to the Wall Street Journal, reporters contacted 150 current and past employees to speak out against these allegations. However, many denied, saying that they would not risk losing job opportunities in the hospitality industry by speaking out about Wynn. It is clear that Wynn's powerful influence over the casino industry in Las Vegas plays an important role when it comes to victims speaking out about sexual harassment. In response to these claims, Wynn has publicly stated, "We find ourselves in a world where people can make allegations, regardless of the truth, and the person is left with the choice of weathering insulting publicity or engaging in multi-year lawsuits." Is there truth behind Steve Wynn's statement? False or sensationalized claims of sexual misconduct can be a reality. However, the context does need to be evaluated. Statistics on false claims vary, and the studies most often only cover rape. On top of this, research from a 2010 Violence Against Women study shows that a small percentage of false claims, there's only a small percentage, however, a majority don't name an actual alleged perpetrator. Are victims of sexual assault and harassment doubted more than victims of theft? Do the accused still face repercussion after a false claim? And what exactly constitutes sexual misconducts? We will discuss these topics shortly after the break. The Me Too movement went viral in October 2017 after sexual misconduct allegations against film producer Harvey Weinstein. The term Me Too is not something new. Tarana Burke, who is the founder of the Me Too movement, coined the term in 2006 after a 13-year-old girl confessed to Burke that she had been sexually assaulted. Burke states she had wished she had told the girl, "Me too." The movement is used to raise awareness of sexual abuse, misconduct, and assault. The accusations made against Weinstein sparked discussion on sexual misconduct in the workplace. It also brought attention to the fact that it was an open secret in Hollywood for years. These cases are not something rare nor specific to Hollywood. It happens in workplaces around the world and in our own communities. One of the most prominent figures in the Las Vegas hospitality industry, Steve Wynn, recently faced allegations of sexual misconduct that took place over the past several decades. According to the Wall Street Journal, reporters contacted 150 current and past employees to speak out about these allegations. However, many denied, saying that they would not risk losing job opportunities in the hospitality industry by speaking out about Wynn. It's clear that Wynn's powerful influence over the casino industry in Las Vegas plays an important role when it comes to victims speaking out. In response to these claims, Steve Wynn has publicly stated, "We find ourselves in a world where people can make allegations regardless of the truth, and a person is left with the choice of weathering insulting publicity or engaging in multi-year lawsuits." Is there truth behind Steve Wynn's statements? False or sensationalized claims of sexual misconduct can be a reality. However, the context needs to be evaluated. Statistics on false claims vary, and the studies most often only cover rape. On top of this, research from a 2010 Violence Against Women study shows that a small percentage of false claims, a majority of them, they do not name an alleged perpetrator. Are victims of sexual assault and harassment doubted more than victims of theft? Do the accused still face repercussion after a false claim? And what exactly constitutes sexual misconduct? Today we're joined by two UNLV students, hospitality major Tawny Washington and UNLV freshman Andrew Klein. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure to be
I
here.
first want to start with you. One of the most important things about sexual harassment and these cases is what exactly constitutes sexual harassment. What do you think it is?
I think when it comes to sexual harassment, there is definitely a broad spectrum, and to each individual woman, each individual man, I think it means something different. But an overall broad definition, I feel like it's making someone feel uncomfortable, whether it's verbals or nonverbals, and it's just constituting as a, like, I would want to say, uncomfortable work environment, not just for one, but for many, for any involved.
Andrew, I want to ask you that same question. What exactly constitutes sexual harassment in your eyes?
For me, sexual harassment would probably be repeated unwanted sexual contact, be it verbal or physical, because there are definitely people that can say things that make you uncomfortable as well as touch people in ways that is definitely uncomfortable.
So when we define sexual harassment or sexual assault, one of the hardest question to actually undergo is what draws the line between harassment being just a miscommunication and blatant harassment. We had the Aziz Ansari's case where he went on a date with a woman. They ended up progressing the date. They went to the place, they hooked up, and she didn't say until months later that she felt uncomfortable. Would that be something that's still harassment? Is that blatant harassment? What really draws that line?
You know, besides the individuals, I do think that in situations like that, it can be compromising for a woman to speak out, and I can get the circumstances that that relationship may be under, especially with certain pressures. But overall, I do feel that sexual harassment, you can tell by people's demeanors, nonverbals, what is uncomfortable to them. I don't think it's foreign to people as far as, especially if you're in a one-to-one setting with someone, you can definitely know where that line is for them with comfort and what they're willing to share and so on and so forth.
So in a situation like that, specifically in regards to that Aziz Ansari's case, is it his fault really? Should he have been able to read those nonverbal body communications, the body language, or is he expected to be a mind reader? What exactly should have been the correct solution to that situation?
I think something as simple as just asking can prevent a lot of these things, a lot of sexual harassment cases from even progressing and starting. I'm not expecting anyone to read anyone's mind, but if you're having a day, oh, I'm sorry, if I touch you, does this make you uncomfortable? Oh, even something as, oh, paying for this, would you mind or would I mind? Or we want to walk you to your car, do you feel comfortable with that? Walking you to your door. I think just kind of suggesting and giving questions and throwing them out there. I think clarifying questions are the key.
I'm going to toss this to you, Andrew. Should men be expected to have that absolute consent, or is there some nonverbal signals that they can pick up on?
Well, for me, when you're dating somebody and you're trying to become close to somebody like that, you're not going to be pulling out a consent form every time you're trying to escalate the situation to the next level. Like, to me, there is a certain amount of like mutual shared knowledge of like where the situation is heading to. And then in case of Aziz Ansari, if you go on a bad date and you look back on it, you felt uncomfortable. I mean, there's nothing he could have done. Like that should have been made very clear at the date whether or not he was making her feel uncomfortable. Going a few months in retrospect and saying like, oh yeah, he made me feel uncomfortable, like that to me just is not sexual misconduct in the slightest, unless he was literally like touching her in places she did not want to be touched, at times she did not want to be touched, or like harassing her verbally, like unless that explicitly happened, then that isn't sexual misconduct to me. And if it was, it should have been reported at the time, because once you go 1 month, 2 months, 3 months down the line, there's virtually no evidence to really have a persecutable case.
Tawny, I know you had mentioned that men should be getting absolute consent. Do you think that in this situation with Aziz Ansari, should he have faced repercussion because of the situation that occurred?
I think so. I think I understand that mutual consent, they both decided to go on that date, but she did not consent to the misconduct placed. So I do feel like there is a thin line where that is for many people is different, but I do think consequences should have been faced because her uncomfort was challenged and compromised.
Mm-hmm. Also in regards to this sense, we had discussed Harvey Weinstein. His allegations made against him were blatant harassment, do you think that they should be placed on the same level of both are you're considering sexual harassment, but is one different than the other?
As far as publicity is concerned, yes. And I understand that industries are different. And in Harvey Weinstein's case, yes, he is very exposed to the media and the public. So I can see how those repercussions may seem harsher in a certain way, in a certain regard. But I do feel that they should be at the same. I don't think just because someone is more famous or more accessible to the public, their repercussions should be more or less. So I feel like that even playing field, it's just more, it's easier for people to see because he's so accessible and exposed.
And Andrew, would you agree that all sexual harassment should be treated the same?
I wouldn't say all sexual harassment should be treated the same, especially if you're going to compare Aziz Ansari to Harvey Weinstein. To me, like, those two instances aren't even playing the same sport, let alone in the same playing field. Because you have on one hand Harvey Weinstein, who is using his position of power to groom young actresses for sexual favors in exchange for acting roles and like success in Hollywood, as opposed to Aziz Ansari, who, again, as far as I can tell, just went on a date with this girl and it didn't go very well. Like, to me, those are two totally different scenarios, and treating both of them the same, to me, actually downplays the significance of sexual harassment and sexual misconduct to me, because then you have people on the outside looking in that aren't too involved in issues like this, and they say, it's like, well, Aziz going on a bad date as opposed to Harvey Weinstein, like, raping scores and scores of women over the course of decades. Like, that to me is totally different. So how can I take any of this seriously if they're both treated the same?
Harvey Weinstein's, his allegations that were publicized really sparked the Me Too movement and really got that going. It then came out that a lot of these Hollywood stars had known about this secret. It was an open Hollywood secret. Do you think that they're innocent in this?
Absolutely not. I feel like if you're privy to the situation and you know that basically your boss is going around using these young people for sexual favors, and you're aware of that, I think you have no moral high ground at that point to be lecturing people about sexual misconduct, because you're almost complacent in watching these people have their lives maybe not ruined, but definitely scarred for having had to go through that kind of ordeal. Like, especially if you're as committed to like protecting women's rights and their sexual health and stuff like that as they say they are, they should have been speaking out about it as it was happening. And I understand it would be very difficult to like watch your career probably tank as a result of speaking out to somebody that powerful, but to do the right thing, sometimes you need to take maybe not consequences, but there will be repercussions, I guess.
And Tanya, I'm going to ask you the same question. Are the people who stayed silent, knowing this secret about Harvey Weinstein, are they innocent?
No, I would have to agree. I do not think they're innocent. I think it takes a lot of courage and bravery to stand up and speak out. I can understand that it could be very compromising in certain situations, especially one like this in Hollywood. But no one is innocent when it comes to this. If you have knowledge, you have knowledge on how to make the situation better.
On top of this, with the Me Too movement and false claims and Steve Wynn, everything that we're talking about today, what would be the appropriate solution for these people who get accused of it? It seems as if people in power, that they never face real consequences. Is resignation enough?
I don't think so. I don't believe so at all. Resignation is just showing that you are accepting that people know. I don't think that you're actually really doing anything about the issues at hand. I think it's just more so, I'm going to step out of this position because it's going to look bad if I don't. It's going to look like my company, however, the people I've groomed aren't worthy because I'm not worthy, so I would just rather step out of the limelight for the time being.
And for me, like, I understand that if there were to be anybody that would abuse their power for sexual favors, it would be people like Steve Wynn or Harvey Weinstein, guys in really high businesses of power with a lot of clout behind them. But I'm also, on one hand, I also know that everyone's entitled to the due process of law. So just because somebody says he assaulted me or he harassed me, he is not guilty until proven innocent. He is innocent until proven guilty, and that applies for anyone. I think it just happens disproportionately to guys like this, not only because of their positions of power may warp their sense of entitlement and stuff like that in regards to women, but I also think that they are also painted as a target because they are so wealthy, and there's a lot to be gained if you take down somebody like that, either be it through lawsuits or settlements and stuff like that, as opposed to regular Joe Schmo. Like I think they are accused far less because there isn't much to be gained out of that for the people that would go through with that kind of stuff. But then, like I said, those people are entitled to the due process of law. They should be innocent until proven guilty, especially if they have to resign or face jail time if it comes to that.
Would you agree with that, Tani? I know false claims is something that we have discussed. Would you agree that these people in power are targeted more just because there's something to gain from it?
No, not completely. I do believe that we do live in a very litigious society, and I can attest to that. But as far as these men in power, people in power in general, but I'm going to focus solely on men for the current topic, I don't personally feel that, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question one more time?
Are people in power, are they more targeted for false claims against sexual assault or harassment?
Well, yeah, okay, so sorry, I just wanted to make sure I was correct with what you were saying. I do feel like they are a target, but I don't think that their power is the sole reason for that. And when it comes to people in power, I do feel like people in power do have the tendency to take advantage. So I think this is just bringing the issue more to light, more so. And I just think it's bringing it more to light, more so than anything else.
I know you're a hospitality major, and you work in the hotel industry here in Vegas. Do you think that there are certain social standards that, especially women who work in hotels, must follow? That you kind of have to flirt with people to either make more money or to have your job. You have to look a certain way, dress a certain way. Do you feel those social standards?
Oh, all the time. Coming from someone who is working in the industry and studying hospitality, I do feel like I have to uphold a certain standard as far as whether it's how I speak, especially being an African American woman. I feel like I have to even try half as harder, I should say, than a lot of my other peers, because African American women do not typically pursue this industry because of all the standards and the social construct of hospitality. So me having to get up, wear my makeup, be pleasant every day, you can't have a bad day. There's no such thing as a bad day as a woman in the industry. There's a lot of things that we have to hide moving forward versus men, especially in these management positions. I feel like we're not taken seriously. We're not taken seriously as such. And when we are, it's because of our looks. It's not because of the work that we have put into it. I feel like it's more so because you have to. We are hired, or we are put in these positions just because we are women and they need to maintain a status quo, promote diversity, so on and so forth. It's never because of our work ethic as women. Since you work in it, how would you suggest fixing that? How can we make it an equal playing field where you don't have to put up with harassment from men and you have to remain pleasant just to make money? I think that's something that you can kind of tackle with time, and I think that's why it's so important now that companies are incorporating diversity and inclusion into their overall mission and vision statements. And I think it's important to have those panels and those people for those discussions, because these things will not be talked about unless. So yes, I think with time, everything is with time. It's going to be right with where we are right now, especially me working in the industry. I'm one of the only women in admin roles. So I think some companies are a little bit more behind and they just need that extra push. And sometimes you even need to see other companies doing things more progressive as far as hiring practices, skill sets, and things like that, and really distributing the positions and titles as well.
Andy, I'm going to toss this to you. What do you think about this? Should women have to deal with catcalling, harassment, when women are working in hotels being grotesque or too touchy or provocative? Should they have to deal with that in order to make money?
I don't think any woman should have to deal with that, but unfortunately with human nature, it's bound to happen. Trying to get somebody who's had a few drinks pumped into them over the course of a long night of gambling, like to get them to stop being like raunchy and grabby, I feel like you're getting into changing the fundamentals of human nature, and I don't think that's really possible. But like to me, I don't like again. It sucks that women do have to kind of deal with that sort of attitudes when they're working in those kind of industries. But unfortunately, like the only thing I can think to suggest is just you have to learn to maybe not necessarily live with it, but deal with it in a way that is professional. And like and also it can also depend on how people interact with the customers as well, because interactions between cocktail waitresses and customers are totally different than in interactions between like front desk people and customers. Like there's the lines get blurred in that area, especially like when alcohol is involved, like when those kind of muddy the waters even a bit more. And to me, like waitresses and people in that industry should make very clear when they're interacting with these customers what is okay and what is not okay, because then that could hopefully guide behavior away from those behaviors that are rude and unwanted in those kind of situations.
I know you say you work in admin, but is that an appropriate response, just to kind of, women have to deal with it, or is there other solutions?
Being where I'm at in the industry, especially being so young, right now that is, and it's very unfortunate, but that's all I see. All I see is I have to act this way, I have to be this way to get those positions. So with time and with me actually being more involved into the industry, because right now I currently work in arenas, but sex sells in Las Vegas, and I'm actually really learning that the hard way as I move forward within my career. It's inevitable, and it's a culture that I am actually susceptible to, and I encourage, because I am getting up every day. Unfortunately, I am getting dressed, I am wearing skirts, I am wearing heels, I am wearing anything that will make me more noticed as far as a professional, not only just in my work environment, but outside of it, because hospitality is a very network-based industry, and when I go into it, even when I'm not intentionally planning on meeting someone or being near someone, I always end up meeting someone. And I feel like as a woman, having that, making sure you're always pretty much up to par and up to being sure you're presentable, I think that's always something that is going to continue. And me being so young, I'm encouraging the culture, and I understand that I am in a way that may not be as effective, but it's kind of something that's embedded and I need to practice, and it's nothing that the hospitality, even this being one of the best in the world, is going to teach you.
And also, like, I think that's kind of the same situation with any career field you go into. There are certain requirements that you're going to need to fulfill in order to be successful. Being a civil engineering major, like, sex doesn't necessarily sell as much as it would in hospitality for sure. But instead of having sex be the like those characteristics being the primary thing people focus on your ability to do these complex calculations and make sure everything you're saying is true, and that won't, like, if you stamp your name on a plan somewhere, that it won't fall down. Like, there are certain things that people value in different industries, and like in trying to change the fundamentals of those industries is like trying to rework human society, and I just don't really think that's possible or very productive. Because again, if I were to go into an engineering firm and say, like, why do you guys care so much whether or not I can do math very well? Like, they're going to be like, what are you talking about? Get out. We're going to have somebody that can do math very well so you can make sure this bridge stands up. As opposed to if I were working in a casino, and let's say being a woman, I guess I can take my advice for what you will, but if I were not attractive, then people would be less likely to give me like come back to see me or give me tips or to do whatever. Like, there are certain things there are certain requirements, criteria that you need to work in certain industries, and that you need to fulfill those. If not, then you're going to have to kind of find a different line of work.
So I think we can all agree that sex does sell, and they do want attractive women in the hospitality industry. But does that mean that drunk men can basically harass these women? Should they just have to deal with it, with men grabbing them, calling them names? Should they have to deal with that because of the industry they work in?
No, I don't think so. If a patron gets too grabby or too harasses a waitress too much, they should be escorted out according to the rules of the establishment. Like, that's just cut and dry right there. If a waitress thinks a guy has gone too far, then he should be punished accordingly. I don't think she should just have to grit her teeth and deal with it. If she really is feeling uncomfortable by that, and that uncomfort outweighs her desire to make money, then absolutely kick the guy out. He deserves it.
Yeah, and with that uncomfort too, I think it's also companies' jobs as well to be present within those situations and supportive, and also employees to the right resources as far as if situations like that should happen.
Yeah, have security around. If they see something getting out of hand, they should step in and escort the guy out or do whatever needs to be done.
So you guys are for these solutions. I know you said you're for the culture of, sex selling, sex appeal, things like that. Have you faced any negative repercussions from it? Have you had any negative experiences because of it?
Actually, yes. As of late, I've had. And it's not intentional. I don't think when I go to work every day, I'm trying to be glamazon or, I want people to notice how I look. But I think it had affected me to a point where men specifically, were not taking me seriously. And I think that comes about when, even if your work ethic is there, I think it's just kind of when people are not used to women in positions of such, because I work currently in human resources, and that's typically a female-dominated field. So it's easier for men to, specifically where I work, it's easier for men to kind of see me as, okay, it's HR. Oh, it's just the HR mom, or however you want to view it. And when it comes to women in the hospitality industry being in finance or operations, it's kind of like, oh, well, okay, she made it this far, I'll give her a little bit more respect. But if it's a field that's more female dominated, I feel it's not given, and your work is not really acknowledged to the extent of another field maybe.
And Andrew, as a male, do you think that it's kind of normalized in this culture that if you're out having, a couple drinks with your guy friends, to kind of cross boundaries when it comes to like verbal harassment with women? Have you ever seen that while you've been out?
I mean, it's not like, oh, let's see how far I can get with this waitress before she kicks me out of the bar. It's more of just if you're out there with your buddies, you're trying to say, oh, let me see if I can get the waitress's number or something like that. Of course, I mean, that's just our nature in trying to go out and seek partners and stuff like that. But normalizing sexual harassment, I wouldn't say every guy around there is actively looking for ways to make women uncomfortable. I wouldn't say that in the slightest.
Do you think that male bartenders or male cocktail waiters, do they experience the same kind of uncomfortableness that the women do?
I personally am of the mindset that just because men, like as the biological difference between men and women, men are generally, again, exceptions to the rule, generally the tougher sex, because throughout our lives you're kind of told to like hold on to your emotions. Like the more you verbalize them, the more you make them known, the weaker you seem. So to me, men do not probably feel the same level of discomfort. And also, to women's credit, they're not nearly as, let's say, for lack of a better word, like bad as guys are, because they're just not as sexually forthcoming as men are. So they probably do not dish out as much harassment as guys do. In my opinion, there's just differences between the sexes.
Tawny, what do you think about this?
I would have to disagree. I do feel like a lot of men facing sexual assault do not come forward as often as women may. Like the social construct of society today, where it's more so, okay, I'm masculine, I have to maintain this macho bravado, and I can't say anything or speak out on these issues. But I think maybe as far as the approach of the assault taking place, may be a little bit different. With women, it may not be as forward. But I do believe it is there, and I just don't believe it as spoken upon enough.
Yeah, I agree that it's also there to a certain extent, but I'm of the mindset that it's not there to as big of an extent. And then also, men probably have different perceptions of what is harassment as women do. That's another thing as to how society has structured itself. It's like, well, if a guy went up to a girl and asked her for her number this way, that's totally uncalled for. But if a woman did the same thing to us, like, you just kind of like brush it off. It's just different means of perception for different situations based off of what sex you are.
And men, you did mention men who do face sexual harassment and sexual assault. Do you think that it's kind of taboo to talk about as a guy?
Absolutely, and especially like once it does cross that boundary, like once you do finally come forward with that, then people definitely, I think, take your problems less seriously being a guy, because you're like, what do you mean? You're a 6 foot tall, 180-pound guy. How can this little girl harass you and make you feel uncomfortable? There's no way. And that can also be a problem in its own right. But especially in regards to like this discussion, like regarding Harvey Weinstein in the hospitality industry, I definitely think that guys are more likely to give out harassment than receive it. And then we're also have different perceptions of what harassment is as opposed to what women think it is.
That we are wrapping up on time. I want to thank our 2 panelists, Tawny Washington and Andrew Klein. If you want to stay up to date with us, you can follow us at UNLV The Scramble on Facebook and Twitter. As always, my name's Sarah Coker. Thank you, and I will see you guys next time.